Hello, hello, hello. Welcome into HeartlandCollegeSports.com. I'm Pete Mundo. It is great to be here with you. So we have to take Stewart Mandel of The Athletic to task here. We have no choice because Stewart Mandel and The Athletic continue to want to give the Pac-12 the benefit of the doubt when they had zero interest whatsoever in giving the Big 12 any benefit of the doubt last year when Texas and Oklahoma announced that they were leaving and the Big 12 was on the brink of collapsing. So what did Stewart Mandel of The Athletic write about here? And this is what I want to go through with you. He wrote this big piece titled TV Numbers Show Pac-12 Might Be Healthier Than We Think. The same conference, yes, might be healthier than we think, that when people could start going to college football games again for the first time in 2 years in 2021, the Pac-12 had half-empty, on a good day, stadiums. That Pac-12, without USC, without UCLA, we are supposed to be told is doing great. Everything is all rosy in the Pac-12. And why is it all rosy in the Pac-12 according to Stewart Mandel? Why? Well, because he says here, and I'll read this to you in The Athletic. He says, while it's absolutely a gut punch, neither USC or UCLA have as big a draw recently as Oklahoma or Texas, and he breaks down the numbers. And he talks about how Oklahoma and Texas each have larger viewership numbers per game than USC or UCLA have had in recent years. Okay, that's true. That's absolutely true. He does go on the note that, yes, USC has been down most recently under Clay Helton, so maybe that's part of the equation here. But either way, all right, bring that up, totally understand it. But then Stewart Mandel does rightly go on to point out something that contradicts his original point. He says the conference's two media partners generally put their best games every week on over-the-air networks ABC or Fox, where games usually draw higher ratings than on cable. He says Oklahoma and Texas appeared on 46 and 33 broadcasts, respectively, on ABC or Fox. Meantime, there were only 28 of those games for USC and only 16 for UCLA. So we all know that in sports, the better channel you're on, the higher viewership you're going to get. You know that, I know that. Every sports fan who's watched sports for a week knows that. So you can't really compare it apples to apples when Oklahoma and Texas, yes, draw bigger numbers, but also get far more broadcasts on Fox and ESPN. All right? So that's number one. So he contradicts his own point, and his point collapses relatively quickly. Then, here's the kicker, though. All right? Here's where Stu Mandel of The Athletic really loses things a little bit. And I called him out on Twitter, and I got to appreciate the fact that many of you, and I'll pull this up here, agreed with me and backed me up on what I responded to Stewart Mandel of The Athletic with. So we'll get to that here coming up in a couple of minutes. But what Mandel goes on to write, and I'll also get to your comments. We're on Facebook Live. We are on YouTube as well. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. We got a lot more YouTube content coming your way. And, of course, leave your comments as well here on the show, and I'll get to those too. But what he goes on to say here in The Athletic is he goes on to show a chart of the remaining Pac-12 and Big 12 schools and their average TV ratings 2015 to 2019, including 2021. And the games against Oklahoma and Texas, in the Big 12's case, and USC and UCLA are excluded for sake of this conversation. And what you'll see here is that when it comes to viewers, the top teams with the most viewers of the remaining Pac-12 teams and the remaining Big 12 teams, in order, Oregon, Stanford, Washington, Washington State, Colorado, and Utah, all with between 1.4 and 2 million viewers for each team. And then you finally get to a Big 12 team with Oklahoma State at 1.28 million, followed by Cal, followed by TCU, then Arizona State, and then you have a bunch of Big 12 teams, West Virginia, Baylor, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. Now, you follow college football, and you're like, does that make sense? Does it make sense that all of a sudden, when you leave the remaining Big 12, Pac-12 teams, that Oregon, Stanford, Washington, Washington State, Colorado, Utah all do significantly better numbers on viewers than Big 12 teams do? Like, does that make sense? When the Big 12 contracts that are being talked about, the numbers that are being thrown out there are $40 to $50 million per team in the future Big 12, when the Pac-12 is looking at half to two-thirds of that, how does that make any sense? Well, Mandel goes on to explain and once again contradict himself in this piece. All right? And here's why. And here's what he writes. As much as Pac-12 coaches and fans loathe the late games, all right, and he's writing this here, they may be the league's saving grace in the next deal. Why? Well, he says here the Big 12 and the Pac-12 have the same two TV partners. Their deals are structured differently. The Big 12's leftover 8 had far more of their games relegated to the ratings graveyard that is Fox Sports 1 than the Pac-12's, while the Pac-12 got more pickups by main ESPN. And that's entirely because the league is able to play games at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time when no other Power 5 leagues are playing. So these numbers are incredibly skewed. Why? Because West Virginia playing Iowa State is more likely to be at 2:30 on a Saturday going up against Alabama and Florida and Michigan versus Nebraska, when Cal playing Utah could be on at 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern Time, right? And there's no other game in town. There's nothing else to watch. If you want to watch Power 5 football at that time of night, you've got one option, and it's usually a late-night Pac-12 game on ESPN, on the main ESPN, versus, for example, West Virginia, Iowa State, going up against a plethora of other games, a top SEC game, a top Big Ten game, and relegated to Fox Sports 1. You're going to compare the Big 12 to the Pac-12, sans Oklahoma, Texas, sans USC, UCLA, and say that the Pac-12 may be a better brand than we realize because of these viewership numbers that are wildly skewed because of what you're doing when you realize and wholly admit that if you want to watch college football and be a degenerate late at night, like many of us are, myself included, there's only one option, and that's a Pac-12 game. And you think that's comparable to the Big 12. That is such a bunch of nonsense, and any thinking person knows it. So I put this on Twitter to Stewart Mandel of The Athletic this week. I wrote here, Mandel contradicts his own point in this piece, admitting that Pac-12 games being the only option in the late-night main ESPN slot is a huge advantage, which undoubtedly skews these numbers. If the Pac-12 and the Big 12 flipped TV slots, it wouldn't be close. The Big 12 would crush them. My point is, if the Pac-12 games, Washington State and Arizona State, was being played at 2:30 on a Saturday against a ton of other conferences and games, and the Big 12 had the late-night game by itself, Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, the Big 12 numbers would destroy the Pac-12 numbers. So Mandel wrote back to me here, and he says, yeah, but that's not an option unless they want to play the games that start at 9:30. And that's the whole point of what the Big 12 is considering right now. The Big 12 is rightfully considering and looking at the possibility of adding multiple Pac-12 teams so they could go from noon Eastern time until midnight Eastern time or 1 a.m. Eastern time. If you add a couple more West Coast teams, the Big 12 can always have a late game. If you have BYU and then you add in, for sake of conversation, Utah, Colorado, Arizona State, whatever your combination is, you can fill a late night slot. And if you're the Big 12, you can go with the East Coast teams, the East Time Zone teams in Cincinnati, West Virginia, and UCF. You can go from a 12 p.m. Eastern start until after midnight Eastern just with the Big 12. And I'll tell you right now, the Big 12 from a TV perspective, if you add Colorado, trust me, Colorado, Oklahoma State in the late night slot, or BYU taking on Houston in the late night slot, BYU facing Iowa State in the late night slot is going to do a lot better than Washington State and Cal. I promise you that. There is no doubt in my mind that it will go better and it will do better for the Big 12 and for all of college football if they bring in some of those teams. There's not a doubt in my mind about that. So I don't know what the case that Stu Mandel's trying to make is outside of trying to prop up the Pac-12. And this guy's, that's been his, I hope the Pac-12 is cutting Stu Mandel a decent side check here for his own sake, because he has become such a shill for the league. And, that's fine. Just be who you are. Like, let's just all admit what you are, which is a shill for the Pac-12. I'm a Big 12 guy. That's what I am. That's how this website started. I cover the Big 12. I love the Big 12. I will always support the Big 12. But I'm not pretending to be a college football top to bottom, coast to coast, cover the entire sport through and through and be even-handed in that analysis. That's not what I pretend to be. That's what he pretends to be. But this guy's been bailing out the Pac-12 since nobody was showing up games in 2021, and he was like, yeah, well, it's 95 degrees and sunny, and there's a beach, and, COVID or something. It's like, dude, stop. Stop. Stop, 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 stop. All right, it was 2021. It was the first time people could go to games in basically 2 years, especially out west, and nobody was going to Pac-12 games. Colorado should be jumping ship if they can. And I'd welcome them back with open arms, as I've said to you many times on this show. Utah, come on in. That's where I would start. And then, assuming Oregon and Washington are not there yet, which I don't think they are, and they do not appear to be, then, you work it out from there. But this is something right now that makes all the sense in the world. For the Big 12 and for a couple of the teams out west, and it will be a better product for whoever picks them up on the TV side, whether it's ESPN or Fox or anybody for that matter. It will be a better TV product with the Big 12. Remember this, Chris Williams of Cyclone Fanatic has made this point in the last few days, and he's dead on about it. Why does Kansas and Iowa State basketball end up on ESPN Plus, which happened this past year? Because ESPN knows that they can get those $9.99 monthly signups from Iowa State and Kansas fans. They know the rabid fan bases that exist in the Big 12. You think that Washington State taking on Oregon State in any sport, I don't care if it's football, basketball, or fencing, you think anybody's running to ESPN Plus to watch that game? No, nobody is. The Pac-12 has benefited. The TV numbers have benefited from the late night slot. Not because of anything they're doing, not because of the product on the field, but because they're the only option, the only game in town. You bring a couple of those teams into the Pac-12, you've got a better conference, a better late night product, more TV slot options, and a Big 12 that's going to be a clear number 3 behind the SEC and the Big 10. That's the answer here. And that's what makes the most sense for everybody involved. All right, so we appreciate you guys joining us here on Facebook Live. We appreciate you being on the show through YouTube. Please do hit that subscribe button before you head out. We've got a lot more YouTube content coming your way as the season rapidly approaches. We, of course, cover the Big 12 top to bottom. We also are on the wherever you get your podcasts. We've got audio content that's dropping all week long. So go find us there, subscribe on the podcast, but make sure on YouTube you're hitting that subscribe button because there will be plenty more content coming your way. Let's see. Just want to run through some things here, see what we've got. Bart, does Colorado bring something other than just football? Cough, cough. All right, Bart, I see what you did there, pal. I see what you did. Hey, listen, it's not my thing, all right? It's not, never has been. Don't plan on it being my thing. That's not what it's about. I can't tell you how many Big 12 fans tell me, oh, man, the road trips to Colorado were fantastic. Oh, gosh, I miss those days. In a day and age of college football when we're losing tradition, when we're losing what makes the sport to many of us great, the history around it, the tradition, things like that, the pomp and circumstance, you can get a little bit of that back with Colorado coming back to the Big 12, can't you? Get a little bit of that back. That's something that's just, it's worth considering so much of that gets broken down in favor of the bottom line. you can get a little bit of that back. Maybe you went to Colorado games in the Big 12 back in the 90s, 2000s. Now you can take your kids to those games, make a long weekend out of it. It's, it's a great trip. But apparently the Colorado administration believes the Big 12 is a JUCO league. That's according to Denver Post columnist who joined our friends over at Sikkim 365. Yeah, Sean Keeley, I believe is his name. He said that the Big 12, according to the Colorado administration, they view the Big 12 as a JUCO league. What a joke. Colorado, just admit you screwed up. Get your pipeline back to Texas for recruiting. Come on back with open arms. We'll take you. I don't care if you admit you screwed up or not, but this is why I love Brett Yormark in this spot too, as the new Big 12 commissioner. He doesn't care about the backstory. He doesn't care about the drama. He wants the Big 12 to be in the best position possible going forward as a business entity. And for that, I respect him, and I really believe that he is the best man for the job in this situation right now. Pete Mundo, HeartlandCollegeSports.com is how you find us. Thank you for being here. Plenty more videos are coming your way soon. Hit that subscribe button, YouTube, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.